They told you to give 10%. They told you it's obedience. They told you if you don't give, you're cursed, and you believed it, without asking why. The truth is, people don't ask questions anymore. We live in a world where fear is used to control belief. You were told to tithe, not because it builds your future, but because it builds theirs. And if the system benefits from your fear, it will never teach you freedom. Real giving doesn't come from pressure. Real giving comes from purpose. You were not born to be manipulated by tradition. You were born to think, to question, to grow. And if someone tells you God demands money to bless you, that's not faith. That's a transaction. That's not love. That's a business. Look at your life. Are you becoming stronger, wiser, more free, or are you stuck in guilt, afraid that if you don't give enough, something bad will happen? Sure. Here's a 700-word expansion of the first keynote asterisk. Giving under fear is not faith, it's control. Asterisk written in a motivational and thought-provoking tone without subheadings. Too many people confuse obedience with fear. They think that just because they're doing what they've been told, they are being faithful. But there is a massive difference between acting out of trust and acting out of fear. When you give because you're afraid that something bad will happen if you don't, that's not faith. That's fear being dressed up to look like religion. And when fear is the foundation, the entire structure is unstable. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you been told to give, not because you were moved, not because you wanted to help, not because you believed in the cause, but because someone told you, if you don't give, you'll be cursed. Or, God won't bless you unless you sow into this. That's not faith, that's manipulation. That's a transaction being passed off as spirituality. Faith is supposed to be about trust. It's supposed to be about connection, alignment, love. It's supposed to come from a place of conviction, not coercion. But what happens when that trust is replaced by threats? What happens when people feel more afraid of not giving than they feel inspired to give? That's when we cross a line. That's when the act of giving becomes less about generosity and more about submission to fear. You can't call it righteousness if it's driven by guilt. You can't call it obedience if it's rooted in anxiety. True giving must come from freedom, not pressure. Otherwise, it's no longer an offering, it's a payment. And once you treat faith like a bill to be paid, you've missed the entire point. God doesn't need your money. What he wants is your integrity, your intention, your alignment with truth. But there are people who benefit from your fear. There are systems and institutions that know exactly what they're doing when they push fear-based giving. They know if you're scared enough, you won't ask questions, you won't stop to think, you won't pause to reflect on whether this is really what faith is supposed to look like. You'll just keep giving, hoping it buys your protection, your breakthrough, your place in heaven. That's not freedom, it's control. That's not a covenant, it's manipulation. And it works because fear is a powerful motivator. People will do almost anything to avoid being cursed, being judged, being punished. But what kind of faith is that? What kind of love demands that you be afraid of it in order to serve it? You don't need to be afraid to be faithful. You don't need to be guilted into giving to be generous. Real faith is bold. It's grounded in trust. It stands on truth, not superstition. It gives freely, without fear of what will happen if it doesn't. If you give only because you're afraid not to, then you're not walking in faith, you're living under control. And it doesn't matter how good it looks on the outside. You could be giving every week, every month, and still be far from the truth, because the motivation is corrupted. It's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. Fear-based giving keeps people stuck. It teaches them that their blessings are tied to a price. It reinforces the lie that God can be bought, that spiritual favor is a transaction. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Because it trains people to view their relationship with the divine like a business deal. You give, you get. You don't give, you're punished. That's not love. That's not trust. That's not faith. Real giving comes from overflow, from clarity, from love. When you truly believe in something, when your heart is aligned, when your mind is clear, that's when your giving has power. That's when it has meaning. not because someone pressured you, but because you were moved by your own truth. So let this be a wake-up call. Examine why you give. Reflect on whether your actions are born from faith or from fear. And if it's fear, don't just keep doing it to stay comfortable. Ask hard questions. Take your power back, because giving under fear is not a path to peace. It's a cycle of control that keeps you small, silent, and spiritually exhausted. You were made for more than that. You were made to live free, not afraid. And that freedom starts when you stop giving out of fear and start living out of truth. Would you like a condensed version of this for a short-form post or voiceover? Here is a 700-word expansion of the second keynote asterisk. A real giving comes from purpose, not pressure, asterisk, in a motivational, reflective tone without any subheadings or subheadings. Giving is one of the most powerful things a person can do. It's not just about money. It's about energy, attention, time, support, everything you offer to the world that comes from inside you. But the value of what you give is never just in the act itself. It's in the purpose behind it. Why you give matters more than what you give, and too many people forget this. When you give out of pressure, out of obligation, out of fear that you'll be judged or punished if you don't, the act loses its meaning. It becomes mechanical, it becomes forced, and something forced cannot be powerful. It cannot transform, heal, or build anything lasting. Pressure turns giving into a burden, not a blessing. People are constantly told that giving is a duty, that it proves loyalty, that it secures favor. But the moment you treat giving like a requirement, it stops being an offering of the heart. It becomes a tax, a toll you pay to stay on the right side of someone else's idea of righteousness. And when that happens, you're no longer connected to your own intention. You're simply responding to external expectations. Purpose is different. Purpose is internal. Purpose comes from awareness. When you give, because you know exactly why you're doing it, because it aligns with your beliefs, your vision, your values, that giving carries weight. It has direction. It has spirit. It becomes part of something greater. You're not just giving to check a box or follow a rule. You're giving to contribute to something real, something alive. There is a deep difference between I have to and I choose to. One is rooted in pressure. The other is rooted in power. And the world doesn't need more people who give just because they're told to. The world needs people who give because they're connected to a deeper reason. People who have thought about their values. People who ask, is this the right thing for me to support? Does this reflect who I am? Is this what I believe in? That kind of giving is pure. That kind of giving changes lives. The truth is, when you give out of pressure, resentment follows. Maybe not right away, but eventually. If you keep handing over your energy without clarity or conviction, there will come a moment where you wonder, why am I doing this? And if the only answer is, because I'm supposed to, then you've already lost connection to your own soul. You've become an echo of someone else's instruction. Purpose protects you from that. Purpose gives your giving meaning that lasts. It makes even the smallest act significant. Because when you're aligned with your reasons, you don't second-guess yourself. You don't give and then regret it. You don't feel drained or confused afterward. You feel fulfilled because you know you made a decision with intention. Too many people feel guilty when they say no. They're afraid they'll be seen as selfish. They're afraid they'll be punished spiritually. But saying no is not selfish when it's done in alignment with your truth. You were not born to live by pressure. You were born to live by principle, and that means knowing when to give and when not to. That means standing in your own values instead of being swayed by fear or guilt. You don't owe anyone your obedience unless it's rooted in purpose. You don't have to support causes, systems, or institutions just because they expect it. You have the right to ask where your energy is going. You have the right to give only when it feels right in your spirit. And when you do that, your giving becomes so much more powerful. Because when you give from purpose, it transforms you as well as the receiver. It builds your integrity. It deepens your confidence. It reminds you that your life is driven by clarity, not chaos. That you are led by conviction, not by fear. So the next time someone pressures you to give, stop and ask yourself, is this what I truly want to support? Does this line up with my truth? Am I doing this because it reflects my purpose or because I'm afraid not to? And let that answer guide you. The world doesn't need more hollow generosity. It needs intentional giving, giving that is real, giving that is free, giving that reflects not just what you have but who you are. Here is a 700-word explanation of the third keynote asterisk. You don't need to pay to be blessed. Walk in truth and purpose instead. Asterisk written in a motivational, thoughtful tone without any subheadings or labeled sections. There's a dangerous idea that has spread quietly, almost invisibly, through spiritual spaces and religious communities. It's the belief that blessings must be purchased, that divine favor has a price tag, that if you want protection, healing, success, or peace, you have to give something, usually money, first. And if you don't, something bad might happen, or something good might be withheld. That belief is not faith. That belief is fear wearing a holy mask. You were never meant to earn blessings by paying for them. You don't need to buy grace. You don't need to trade money for favor. You don't need to perform for peace. Real blessings don't come because you gave a certain amount during a service. Real blessings don't wait on you to meet a financial target. They come when you align yourself with truth, when you live with intention, when your life reflects purpose and honesty. People have been trained to believe that giving guarantees a result, that if you sow a seed, a harvest must come. But life doesn't work like a vending machine. You can't insert a few dollars and expect God to drop down your miracle. If that's how blessings worked, then the wealthiest people in the world would also be the most blessed, but they're not. Some of the most broken, empty, and lost people are the ones who have the most money, and some of the most peaceful, joyful, and fulfilled people have very little. So what does that tell you? It tells you that blessings aren't about wealth. They're about wisdom. They're about how you live, how you love, how you move through the world. Blessings are tied to purpose, not payment. You don't receive them because you earned them financially. You receive them because you're living in alignment with the truth. And when you're in alignment, you don't have to chase blessings. Blessings find you. The idea that you have to give something first in order to receive is a human-made rule. It's based on control, not freedom. It makes people afraid not to give. It teaches them to believe they are always one payment away from losing favor, and that's not faith. That's spiritual anxiety. That's a cycle of guilt disguised as devotion. But when you understand that truth is what unlocks favor, not money, everything changes. You stop being afraid of curses. You stop believing that your breakthrough depends on how generous you are financially. You begin to see that your breakthrough depends on your choices, your mindset, your willingness to live out your values, no matter the cost. Walking in truth is hard. It means letting go of systems that were built on fear. It means standing up against traditions that no longer reflect what's right. It means being willing to say, I believe in giving, but I don't believe in paying for blessings. And sometimes that position will make people uncomfortable. Sometimes it will make you a target, but integrity is more valuable than approval, and peace is worth more than popularity. You were never meant to be manipulated into spiritual transactions. You were meant to live with clear eyes, open hands, and a bold heart. When you start walking in truth, you stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop being intimidated by demands. You begin to give when you feel led, not when you're being told. You start measuring your growth by your peace, not by your financial sacrifice. People forget that the most powerful blessings in life don't cost anything. Clarity, love, peace, resilience, wisdom, you can't buy those. They come from within. They grow when you're honest with yourself. When you do what's right even when it's inconvenient. When you treat people with kindness, when you forgive, when you stand for something greater than yourself. That's where blessings live, in action. In character, in conviction, the truth is simple. You don't have to pay to be loved. You don't have to give to earn protection. You don't need to purchase peace. What you need is to live in alignment with what is right, to serve others without expecting a transaction, to move with purpose in everything you do. That's where the blessing is, not in the offering plate, but in the life you build when you walk in truth. When you understand this, you stop performing, you stop stressing, you start living, and you realize that real blessings don't come when you pay the price. They come when you become the person who's ready to receive them. Here's a 700-word explanation of the fourth keynote asterisk. Blind obedience to tradition can be a greater sin than disobedience asterisk, written in a motivational, introspective tone without any subheadings or labels. There's a kind of danger that doesn't look like danger. It doesn't come with loud warnings or flashing lights. It comes quietly. It comes dressed in respectability. It hides inside routines, inside rituals, inside traditions that have been passed down without ever being questioned. And over time, people begin to obey those traditions, not because they understand them, not because they believe in them, but simply because that's what they've always been told to do. That kind of obedience feels safe, but it's a trap. When you do something over and over without knowing why, you lose your power. You stop thinking for yourself. You stop asking questions. You silence your instincts, and even worse, you call it righteousness. You begin to believe that because you're following the rules, you must be doing the right thing. But following the wrong rule without thinking is not holy, it's dangerous, because it allows anything, even lies, to continue in the name of truth. History is full of people who committed great harm not because they were evil, but because they were obedient. They did what they were told. They never asked if it was right. They never stopped to challenge the system. They trusted tradition more than they trusted their own conscience, and in doing so, they gave away their responsibility. That's not just weakness, that's a kind of spiritual laziness that turns people into followers of fear instead of seekers of truth. It takes courage to question what you've been taught. It takes strength to look at something that's been labeled holy or right and say, but does this actually align with truth, with justice, with love? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the traditions we inherit are rooted more in control than in clarity. Sometimes the rules were created not to liberate, but to dominate. And if we follow them blindly, we become part of the system that keeps others bound. Disobedience, when it comes from conscience, can be more righteous than blind obedience. When you choose not to follow something because you know it's not right, even if everyone else is doing it, that is integrity. That is moral clarity. That is spiritual maturity. It's not about rebellion for its own sake. It's about having the courage to walk away from what no longer serves truth, even if it costs you approval, community, or comfort. Many people were taught to obey first, think later. But when thinking is delayed, discernment dies. And without discernment, how do you know what you're truly serving? Are you serving truth? Or are you just performing obedience to avoid criticism? Are you growing in wisdom? Or are you just repeating patterns you were handed, hoping they'll keep you safe? Safety is not the same as truth. Comfort is not the same as clarity. You can follow every rule and still be completely lost if those rules are built on misunderstanding or manipulation. And you can break a rule and still be walking in integrity if your actions are guided by justice, by compassion, by deeper understanding. That's the paradox most people are afraid to face, that sometimes, to stand for what is right, you have to go against what is traditional. This isn't an excuse to be reckless or rebellious without reason. It's a call to be thoughtful, to be awake, to know why you do what you do. Blind obedience keeps people stuck. It creates cycles of silence. It tells people that asking questions is dangerous, but asking questions is where all growth begins. Truth is not afraid of scrutiny. Real faith can handle doubt, and real wisdom welcomes the challenge of curiosity. There is no strength in doing what you're told just to avoid conflict. Real strength is found in doing what's right, even when it challenges what's familiar. And yes, people will misunderstand you. They'll say you're disobedient. They'll say you're rebellious. But remember, the most powerful transformations in history were sparked by people who dared to question tradition, who dared to disobey when obedience meant compromising truth. You were not created to be a copy. You were created to be conscious. You were not made to repeat, you were made to discern. And if your spirit tells you that something is wrong, even if it comes from a respected tradition, you owe it to yourself to pause, to examine, to ask, because the cost of blind obedience is too high. It robs you of freedom, of clarity, of authenticity. So don't be afraid to challenge what you've been taught. Don't be afraid to walk a different path if it leads you closer to truth. Blind obedience may win you applause for a moment, but only conscious, courageous living will give you peace in the end. Here's a 700-word expansion of the fifth keynote asterisk. A true freedom begins when you question what you've been told to accept. Asterisk written in a motivational, thought-provoking tone without any subheadings or labels. The greatest gift you can give yourself is the ability to ask questions. Not just questions about the world around you, but about everything you've been told to believe, everything you've been conditioned to accept without thinking. Society, culture, religion, family, and even the media often try to hand you a ready-made set of rules, beliefs, and expectations. And for most of your life, you're told to follow them without question. You're taught that asking why is unnecessary or even disrespectful. But true freedom doesn't come from just following what's handed to you. It comes from questioning it all. When you accept things without questioning them, you're not living your life, you're living someone else's version of it. You're being shaped by external forces, whether those forces are institutions, ideologies, or other people's expectations. They set the boundaries of your reality, and you live inside them without realizing that you have the power to break free. True freedom begins when you stop accepting things at face value. It starts when you open your eyes to the possibility that you may have been led down the wrong path and decide to find your own way. We live in a world full of noise, opinions, doctrines, ideologies, and pressures all competing for your attention. It's easy to get caught up in all of it, to absorb it without thinking critically. The problem is that when you accept things without questioning them, you lose yourself in the process. You begin to let others define who you are, what you should believe, what you should value, and what you should pursue. And in that process, you forget your own voice. You forget the inner wisdom that is unique to you. We're all born with the capacity to think for ourselves. It's part of our nature to question, to be curious, and to seek understanding. But over time, many of us stop questioning. We fall into the rhythm of conformity. It's easier to go along with what everyone else is doing or believing than to stand up and say, I want to understand why. But when you stop questioning, you stop growing, you stop evolving, you stop discovering who you really are. And that's when you start living in a box of other people's making. Think about all the beliefs and values that have been passed down to you. Some of them may be true, but some of them might not be. Some beliefs may be based on wisdom, while others may be based on fear, tradition, or control. Some may help you grow, while others keep you stuck. The only way to know which is to ask yourself the hard questions. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Who benefits from me believing this? Is this truth, or is it just something that's been ingrained in me without my consent? Freedom comes when you learn to question those assumptions. It comes when you realize that you have the power to decide what you believe, what you value, and what your life should look like. And this doesn't mean rejecting everything or living in constant rebellion. It means giving yourself permission to examine everything and to choose what resonates with your truth. It means that you don't blindly accept what others tell you. Instead, you dig deeper, you seek understanding, and you make your own decisions based on what feels right to you. To question what you've been told to accept is to take ownership of your life. It's about stepping into your personal power and no longer allowing others to dictate your reality. The fear that many people have when it comes to questioning is that they might discover something uncomfortable or challenging. It's true that questioning can lead to change, sometimes change that feels unsettling at first. But true freedom isn't about staying in the comfort of what you know. It's about the courage to embrace uncertainty and allow yourself to evolve. The truth is, the world is full of systems and structures that want to keep you small, passive, and unquestioning. These systems thrive when you follow without thinking, when you go along with the crowd, when you accept things without challenging them. But the moment you decide to question, you begin to reclaim your sovereignty. You begin to free yourself from the mental chains that have kept you stuck in the same place. And with that freedom comes the power to create the life you truly want. This doesn't mean you have to reject everything you've been taught or rebel against every tradition. It means you have to be willing to evaluate them, to examine whether they serve your truth, your growth, and your purpose. And if they don't, you can choose to let them go. The more you question, the more you understand yourself. The more you understand yourself, the more power you have to shape your life and live authentically. So don't be afraid to question. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. True freedom isn't about following what everyone else is doing or believing. It's about listening to your inner voice and following it, even if it leads you down a path that's less traveled. Because in the end, it's not the beliefs you accept blindly that give you freedom. It's the courage to question, to challenge, and to live according to your own truth.